In her book, The Stages of Parenthood, Ellen Galinsky says, awaiting the birth of a child is strangely similar to the time before entering a new junior high, before moving, before getting married. Something is about to happen that will change everything. A new person, a mystery person, will enter the lives of these parents-to-be, and nothing again will be quite the same. We can plan and prepare and imagine what this new world of motherhood will look like for us, but there's only one guarantee: the element of surprise. Here's what a few different moms had to say when I asked them about this transition. First, Chantel Allen.
I thought I knew what what it was gonna be like and had experience, and then you have this child that's put into your car and you go home with it, and it's like this rude awakening of did you really just put a kid in my car? I don't know what I'm doing.
And here's Ashley Brown.
I thought that motherhood was going to be beautiful, and it has been. It has been. Now, like I said, I also was real about it's going to have some challenges, and so that it has been the case as well.
And Lynette Shepard.
It was really a wake-up call right from the beginning. He just screamed himself hoarse the first night we had him home from the hospital.
This is the How She Moms podcast with Whitney Archibald. I'm a mother of 5 on a mission to help moms connect with your kids, manage your homes, and create your own unique version of motherhood. I curate ideas from different moms so you can pick and choose what works for you and your family. Few rites of passage are as sudden and as full of surprises as the moment you become a mom. It's dramatic and emotional. So dramatic, in fact, that I got all crazy and I actually wrote a musical theater-style song about it. I just took a songwriting masterclass from Alicia Keys, and so I decided to put what I learned to use for this episode. So here's the first verse. You can hear the whole thing if you stick around until the end of the episode. We put him in his car seat. They let us take him home. They didn't ask if we were qualified. They just left us on our own. They said it would be difficult. They said it would be sweet. They said we didn't know what tired really was. They said it would be joyful, draining, noisy, smelly, crazy, and incredible. It was all true. I'm me, but a little not me. I'm so much more, but a little less. It's not quite what I expected. So much joy and so much mess. It's actually tempting to write a whole musical about the different stages of motherhood because I think motherhood follows the classic narrative arc of the hero's journey in so many great works of literature, from Homer's Odyssey to Star Wars, Harry Potter, and The Lion King. The hero embarks on a grand adventure, meets countless obstacles, defeats the dragon, and then returns transformed. The literary scholar Joseph Campbell famously broke the first part of the hero's journey, the part of the journey that correlates with this transition into motherhood, into 5 stages. Not all of them apply to all moms, of course, but they're pretty spot on. First is the call to adventure. Second is the initial refusal of the call or reluctance to accept it. Third is supernatural aid. 4 is the crossing of the threshold into a new world. And 5 is the belly of the whale, the final separation from the hero's known world and self. This new world is scary and full of surprises, even for Lynette Shepard, who was just about as prepared as she could have been. She even studied family science in college.
All my life, all I wanted to do was be a mom. I wanted to have like 8 kids. And so I settled in family science because I felt like that would give me the strongest foundation for being a good mom. I felt like I was really well prepared. I felt like with all the research that I'd done and all the papers that I had written and all the classes that I had taken, that I had this really strong foundation and that I would be prepared for whatever life threw at me. And so that was, I think, Heavenly Father looked down and said, okay, we'll see. And so My first baby was born just a couple of weeks before I finished all my coursework and before I graduated. And then this little boy was born, and from the second he was born, let me know that he was not going to follow my perfect plan for him. And he just screamed himself hoarse the first night we had him home from the hospital. He screamed all night long, and by the time morning came, my husband and I were both exhausted. We had just been trying to walk the floor with him and all night long walking the halls, and no relief from his screaming. And we're just like, this is not how it was supposed to be. I think there was a mix up in the nursery. This one is definitely not ours. He's not following the perfect plan. And it was really a wake up call right from the beginning. And that's how it went from that point on, really. It was years after that. I was just struggling to figure out, okay, how do these principles and these theories and these research that I did in college, how does it work in actual practice with a child who doesn't want to listen, who feels like, he was the poster child for strong will. He's just like, oh yeah, you think I'm going to do it that way? Well, I'll show you.
Lynette is a mother of 5 kids who are now all teens and young adults, and she and her husband Greg host a great podcast called How to Raise Grown-Ups. Chantel Allen, a life coach and podcaster at Living and Loving Your Life, had a similar experience.
I think being the oldest, I thought I knew what it was gonna be like, and had experience. And then you have this child that's put into your car, and you go home with it, and it's like this rude awakening of, did you really just put a kid in my car? I don't know what I'm doing. And so I think it was this whole shift in reality of, I knew the book stuff, but now I have to apply it. And the child didn't want to act like the book stuff was telling me to do. So it was this kind of rude awakening, very, very exhausting. But like I said, I had 4 and 4 years. So I really had to kind of learn very, very quickly how to kind of jump into that whole pregnancy, infancy, lack of sleep stage. And I think I was just grappling at whatever I could possibly come up with at that time. I think we can pretend all day long, but we have no idea what we're expecting.
Misty Kempton, on the other hand, did not have experience with kids and wasn't even sure she wanted to be a mom.
And so I'm adopted and an only child. And so I didn't have really like a lot of little siblings or anything like growing up that I like knew of. So I was super weirded out with babies. I was like, I can't touch babies. I don't like babies. I remember I had to babysit and I had to call my mom and be like, I don't even know how to change a diaper. What am I doing? And so I kind of was like, I don't really want to have kids. That's kind of how it started out. Like, I don't really want to have kids. And then when I met Chase, he comes from a family of 5, like he has a large family, and he was like, no, I think having kids would be fun. And I was like, yeah, kids, ooh, like, oh, I'm this really good wifely person who can be a mother, but inside I was like absolutely terrified.
Yeah.
And then eventually, after we were married for about 2 years, we're like, hey, let's just see where it goes. And all of a sudden we got pregnant, and I was very scared about it, but it was really fun and definitely an adventure. And I learned a lot about who I was. And my mom even said, when I was talking to her when my daughter Everly was born, that it was almost like she saw a complete switch flip, because I was never like this really maternal, motherly person growing up. And then when Everly was born, I was like completely different.
This episode is part of a series of episodes about the transition to motherhood. Last week, I interviewed Emily about what it was like to become a mom as a teenager. If you missed that one, you'll definitely want to go back and hear her story. Today, we're going to focus on the many surprises that come along with motherhood, and I'm working on other episodes about how the transition to motherhood affects identity and career plans. As any moms listening know, Lynette, Chantel, and Misty are not alone in being surprised by motherhood. Here's just a partial list of things you have no way of predicting. What the birth will be like, whether your baby will be healthy, what your body will be like afterwards, whether or not you'll get postpartum depression or anxiety, how you'll function with extreme sleep deprivation, and how you'll feel when you look at your baby for the first time, how delighted you'll be by those first smiles, and the sensation of the sweet rise and fall of your baby asleep on your chest. The degree of the surprise and whether the surprise is positive or negative depends a lot on expectations. It was so fascinating to talk to different moms about their expectations and the collision of those expectations with reality. It was a pretty mixed bag of moms who were pleasantly surprised and those who were blindsided. And a lot of that depended on what other moms were telling them. Let's start with Hannah Olson, a mom of 4 young kids, all 5 and under, who runs a great Instagram page at Freckled Han.
When I found out I was pregnant with Lydia, which is my oldest, she is 5. It was not a planned pregnancy. It was, the timing wise, it was fine. Like, I had just graduated. My husband was close to graduating from school. But it just wasn't really the timeline that I had envisioned yet. Like, I knew that stage of my life would come, but it wasn't ready. Anyway, I think it's one of those things where you find what you look for, because I was already kind of grumpy about it. And then it just felt like everyone that I talked to didn't have like super great things to say about having a baby and parenthood, and like, oh yeah, like they'd always mention, like, slip in the fun stuff, but say goodbye to your sleep and date nights, like, oh, those are a thing of the past, and you just, all these kind of negative sides of parenthood. And since I already wasn't in like a great mental space already, I kind of fixated on those things. Anyway, there were a few Instagram accounts that I followed at the time of moms that actually seemed to enjoy their life. And so I really kind of held on to those, because that was important for me to see examples of people who were genuinely happy with kids. Anyway, I was just convinced that I was gonna just hate everything about having a baby, because I mean, that sounds dramatic, but I was actually very dramatic at the time. I mean, hormones are no joke, right?
Yeah.
But after she was born, I realized, like, okay, even though this doesn't make any sense, this is actually really amazing, and I love this, right?
On the other hand, if your expectations are too rosy, like my friend Jen Brewer, your surprise can go the other way.
If you're a woman in a very Orthodox Christian religion, that's your life. Is everything you do is to grow up and be a mom, and grow up and be a mom, and this is what you're going to do. And I had notes, I had books, I had ideas of what I was going to do and how I was going to be, and wowza. Yeah, I had it all planned out. Mother of the year right here. Like, totally. Started into parenthood with twins, a husband in medical school, 0 money, 0 husband involvement. It was a baptism by fire, and it went downhill from there. It was that ultra culture shock of, nobody told me it would be like this. Like, the no sleep and no contact with humanity, and it was bad. So I went through, I would say, a depression of motherhood, and then through a guilt, the guilty mom, if I've got to read every mother book, I have to do everything right. I have to, like with my first kids, I was the typical, I laugh because my mom, who has 7 kids, came and stayed with me. And I was the total first time mom, boiling anything that fell on the floor. Oh, your pacifier dropped. Oh, we need to boil it. We need to sterilize it before we give it back. I was that mom. And then by child 3, when she came out, I laughed at her, and I'm like, why did you not roll your eyes at me or laugh at me? And she just smiled and said, everybody needs to go through their stages. Everybody needs to go through their time.
You can find more of Jen's wisdom about life, family, and nutrition at jenbrewer.com. Some moms, myself included, anticipate motherhood for years before it happens for them, either through fertility issues or miscarriages or other things. Here's Joy Chantry, who blogs at joysfunstuff.com.
I mean, we had years of infertility before we were able to have our first, and we actually had our first baby passed away right before I was going to deliver. And so we had a long time where that's all we wanted were babies, to have a family. And it didn't come, and then it finally did. And then I was depressed. It was so hard because it was such a lonely world. And I think that can be a really hard place for people to be in, to think, is this really what this is? But my sister, who's like 9 years older than I am, who has, her kids are in the next stage, she always says, just give it a few years. Wherever you are, whatever the challenge is, give it a few years and it'll be totally, it could be totally different. And she's right.
Another factor in your expectations comes from all the advice moms inevitably get when they're pregnant. Here's Marissa Young, host of the podcast Young Honest Mother.
During my baby shower, I remember sitting in a circle of women who, many of them were already mothers. And I asked, kind of pleading with them, like, please tell me, what was your experience like? Like, what did you go through? What were some of the challenges? What were some of the things that were fun and joyful? And I had such a range of responses. They were kind of on a spectrum and really stratified actually from one another. So on one end, people would say things like, oh, it's just going to be so amazing. You're going to love that new baby smell. Oh, so very just like rainbows and butterflies. And then on the other hand, I would have people say things like, well, I don't want to scare you, so check back with me after you have the baby and then we'll talk.
A pregnant belly is a big old target for the slings and arrows of unsolicited advice and personal birth stories, often horror stories. Most of it's well-meaning, trying to prepare the new mom for what awaits. And it can be useful to hear a wide range of experiences. The problem is, nobody can prepare you for your own unique circumstances. Here's Devin Smitty, a parenting coach with Megan Thompson Coaching. One of her friends just had her first baby.
She was like, I had no idea it was going to be this hard. I mean, her kid's not sleeping very well. She's just in that very early, I think he just turned a month old. And she's like, I don't know how I didn't know it would be this hard, because she has lots of brothers and sisters who already had lots of kids, and she's very involved in her nieces and nephews' lives. So it's not like she had no childcare experience going in. And all of her friends have already had kids and babies. So she's kind of been along for that ride. And she's like, why did nobody tell me? And we were all like, well, first of all, we did a little bit, but also you don't want to scare somebody. And that might not be their experience. Like, my experience might not be your experience. So I'm not going to like project that onto you before it even happens. But most of all, you can't really tell somebody what it's going to be like until you go through it,
And they might not believe you.
They might not believe you. I would have been super dismissive. I would have been like,
That's not going to happen to me.
Well, you might be okay with your kid not eating homemade food, but my child will eat my homemade food, and my kid's going to sleep through the night by 8 weeks. Like, I wouldn't have thought that consciously, but I think subconsciously I thought, it'll be fine for me. It might not have been fine for you, but maybe you just weren't organized enough. Or maybe you just weren't type A enough, but I'm going to type A this and it's going to be easy and great. You just don't know me, And oh man, how much we laugh in the face of that. Now it's like, yes, but nobody could have told me any different. Yeah. You have to live it.
Yeah. Luckily, as hard as the hard parts are, some of the surprise just comes from the magnitude of the joy and wonder of the whole experience. Ashley Brown, host of the Routine and Things podcast and mother of two, probably summed it up best.
I thought that motherhood was going to be beautiful. I didn't really, I knew that it was going to be challenging, because everybody always says that. So I was still had some realism to it's going to be a challenge, but I also was like, ooh, I get to have this little human that I get to, just mold into this beautiful person along with God. And I'm just like, this is going to be a beautiful experience. And it has been. Now, like I said, I also was real about it's going to have some challenges. And so that it has been the case as well. But it has so been beautiful. I was just upstairs earlier this morning with my babies. One is a baby. She's 1. And then my oldest is 3. Okay. And I was upstairs with them and looking at them and y'all are so freaking amazing. The smiles, the happiness the joy that they have. I'm just I love that energy. And so being able to really, even in the challenging times, because I'm in the toddler phase and she's doing a little bit of work to me right now. I'm already a patient individual. I'm give me even more because she is testing limits and everything. And so even in those times, I'm still it's beautiful to me because I'm she's learning herself and she's learning the world. And it's just an amazing experience to be able to witness that. I'm always like, you were in my womb. Like, I was carrying you for 9 months. Y'all are just getting older, and I love it.
Misty Kempton was very surprised by the connection she felt with her baby.
Probably the biggest surprise was just like how much love that I felt for her, because everyone told me while you're pregnant, like, oh, don't you just have this huge connection with your belly? Don't you just love this child who's inside of you? And I'm like, no. I was like, I don't have anything to connect it to. Like, there's no face. It's just a belly. It makes me throw up. It makes me sick. Like, I have no connection to this belly. And then when she came out, it was like, oh yeah, like she's literally always been here. Cause I was really worried that I wouldn't have this huge connection to her. I was like, how am I ever going to connect to something if I can't even connect to something that's living inside of me? But it was so amazing how quick it just happened and how I was like, wow, this makes sense. I love her with everything inside of me and I would do anything to protect her. And I've known her for 5 minutes. So I think that was probably the biggest shock for me, just because I didn't know how to love somebody that you hadn't really met yet.
Of course, for many women, motherhood doesn't start with a pregnancy, which can make for an even bigger surprise. Kathleen Stout had just started the foster care process and was on vacation in Scotland with some friends when she got a life-changing phone call.
I had 2 weeks to prepare my house for a teenager, a 15-year-old and a 3-year-old. And so that happened and I met them and did one visit, and then the next day they moved in.
Wow.
And,
talk about a sudden change.
And so just learning their different needs and being able to work full time and be a single mom was
a lot.
Really challenging the first year.
There's so much more to Kathleen's story, as you can imagine, so next week's episode will focus on her sudden transition to motherhood. Kathleen's experience brings us to one of the biggest surprises of becoming a mother. Nobody knows this child or children that launch you into motherhood. He or she is a complete stranger, and the child's temperament, health, and personality has a lot to do with what motherhood looks like. Like Lynette, my firstborn was colicky and spent a lot of the first year of his life screaming. I remember one long night and a string of long nights. My husband was working yet another late night shift, and I was well into the second hour of nonstop screaming. I felt tired, of course, but worse than the fatigue was the feeling of helplessness. I had no idea what to do. All the regular things, feeding, changing the diaper, rocking, singing, even running the vacuum, faucet, and hairdryer for some white noise, they had all failed me, and he just kept screaming. Then a new emotion kicked in, desperation. I just couldn't handle any more screaming. I laid him still screaming safely in his crib, stuck my fingers in my ears, ran into my bedroom, and just started jumping on the bed like a maniac, just to get out my pent-up frustration. After having 4 more babies, all much easier than him, I realized that some babies are just harder to take care of than others. This was Catherine Griesman's experience, too.
She's just been hard, like from the labor on. She has been a difficult child. No new parent says it's a breeze. Yeah, just with some of those sensitivities, it was really difficult with sleeping. She didn't sleep through the night till she was 16 months old. And so like I was back to work at 4.5 months, and there were times I was back at work and I was still getting up 3 or 4 times in the night with her because she would just cry and be uncomfortable, and I don't know why, but because she surely didn't need to eat, at 9 months, like 4 times a night, 10 months, 12 months. So it was tough.
And while we sometimes think our kids will be carbon copies of ourselves or our husbands, that's not a real thing. Here's Marissa Young again.
I was really excited about having a child. And then I had my child and realized how much he challenged me in every single aspect of my being. And he's been a very intense personality since the beginning. He's very clingy. He's very emotional. He's very boisterous. He's very adventurous. And I am, for all intents and purposes, the opposite of those things.
The next major surprise is what happens to our bodies during and after labor. There are the physical effects, of course, recovering from the labor and all the parts of our bodies that tear and stretch and change forever. And we have no idea how our bodies will react to the surging hormones. For Jackie Johnson, who has muscular dystrophy, the physical concerns eclipsed everything else.
I think my only concerns really were physical concerns. Like I couldn't wrap my head around being a mom before I like how am I going to be a mom? How am I going to carry her? Like I could not. I'm not a strong person. Like how am I going to get her off the floor? How am I going to be a safe mother? Like how am I going to take care of her when my husband's not around? Or and just because I never had to take care of an infant, so I think I was just concerned about that kind of stuff and not planning in the long term at all. Like, and then funny enough, all that stuff just worked out. Like, so all that worry was for nothing. My pregnancy was fine. Like, I didn't have any issues except for throwing up, which I like was horrible. Throwing up was heartburn, and throwing up was horrible. As far as like my complications, like I didn't have any, and so and then once I had her, just it's funny when you're disabled or handicapped, you're just so used to doing like figuring things out, like how to work for you or how to get things. So that's just that's all. I was so nervous about that, but it's just another element of that, like learning how to do that as a handicapped person. So it all worked out. I say this now, it's funny. I was lucky. My husband lost his job right before right around the time, and it ended up being a really good thing because it would have been too exhausting, and he was able to get up with her at night. He was able to help me. I had a C-section, so I couldn't do anything anyways. Like everything worked out, not in the way that you think it's going to work out, but it did.
For all of us, our bodies are never quite the same afterwards, which can be an ongoing struggle of acceptance. Diana Visser, a mother of 2, opened up about this struggle.
Postpartum stage for me was really hard. Like my body totally changed, and that was really hard. Not getting sleep was really hard. Trying to feel like I needed to do everything was really hard. I'm going to be like super vulnerable here, but it's good. My body like changed a lot. And so when I want to say she was probably about 4 years old, and I figured I was like, okay, I need to like get in really good shape and take really good care of myself. And like, so I lost a lot of weight after I had her, but a lot of it was like, I don't want her to be like, oh, my mom's so embarrassing, like, because I wanted her to see me in a positive way. And it was really good, but then it got like obsessive. It like went to the dark side, to like use a euphemism, right? Yeah. So then with Karsten, I had like the same experience. Like my body totally changed again, and it was really hard. But I think this time around, like obviously I'm still working on it, but this time around I'm trying to do it more like not for the image of my children or what are they going to think of me, but more that like I want to have the energy to be able to like play with them and go hiking with them and not worry about like, are they judging me? Are other people judging me? But like, how do I feel? So it's a much slower process and it looks very different, but to like not be so judgy for myself and then imagine that my children are judging.
You also don't know ahead of time how you will react to extreme, prolonged sleep deprivation. We all know to expect this with motherhood, but you simply cannot understand it until you live it. It makes you do crazy things. I'll tell you one of my weirder and slightly embarrassing sleep deprivation stories. One morning, I woke up groggily from yet another mostly sleepless night with an infant, but this time I felt different, a little more uncomfortable. It took me a minute to understand what precisely was uncomfortable, and then I headed to the bathroom to confirm my suspicions. You guessed it, or actually you probably didn't. I woke up wearing a diaper. Somewhere in the foggy blur of night feedings and changing, I had diapered myself with an infant-sized diaper, not fastened, of course. Surprise! The last 2 surprises we're going to talk about in this episode are some of the most difficult ones, depression and anxiety. Again, something that you can't predict ahead of time. And it's not only postpartum. For many women like Rebecca Brown-Wright, host of the new Pause and Connect podcast, it starts during pregnancy.
I had the best pregnancy physically, but mentally and emotionally, it was so challenging. I really was terrified and scared of what my life was going to change into and how I was going to become and what the burdens and responsibilities that were going to be placed on me. And it was overwhelming. And I have since learned that I have anxiety, and I didn't know I had anxiety at the time. And so I think I was experiencing really large heaps of anxiety. And because I had such an easy physical pregnancy, nobody wanted to hear from me, because I was feeling great and I had no symptoms. And so when I would say, I'm not happy, or this is really hard for me, people just shut me down. They just didn't want to hear it, because they said, you're not throwing up, you're not, you don't have heartburn, you don't have all of the terrible symptoms that I experienced. So I don't want to hear your stories.
When I asked Joy Chantry what surprised her about motherhood, she said,
well, in all honesty, probably the biggest one is that I realized that I was depressed. That was a really hard one. When you have babies back to back, that postpartum is no joke.
Yeah.
And I'm a very social person, but I would limit myself with interactions from people, and it was really, really hard. But it took a long time for me to understand that I needed some help, and getting that help and reaching out made a huge difference for me, in that I was able to kind of own where I was a little bit better and enjoy where I was. And the emotions weren't just so on the surface like they had been for so long, but that I could feel things more calmly and appreciate things. And I think some of that comes with getting more sleep as well. Because when you've got the baby nonsense where they're up all the time, that's brutal to even being able to put a thought together.
Catherine Griesman's anxiety kicked in postpartum.
I didn't have postpartum depression, but I definitely had postpartum anxiety. My anxiety was so high that at times it was hard to think through things rationally, because it was just gripping me of like, am I hurting her by trying to do this? Do I just need to let this go? Like, I'm trying to do the best for her, but in doing the best for her, am I doing the worst, And so it was just incredibly difficult.
Even for moms without diagnosed anxiety, there's plenty to worry about with a new baby around. Is she eating enough? Is he still breathing? What's that weird rash? So much is new and surprising, and the stakes feel so high. But for all the worries, the sleepless nights, and the unmet expectations, there are those sweet moments in the rocking chair, the midnight waltzes, that first smile, and ooh, that new baby smell. We put him in his car seat. They let us take him home. They didn't ask if we were qualified. They just left us on our own. They said it would be difficult. They said it would be sweet. They said we didn't know what tired really was. They said it would be joyful, draining, noisy, smelly, crazy, and incredible. It was all true. I'm me, but a little not me. I'm so much more, but a little less. It's not quite what I expected. So much joy and so much mess. I look a little puffy. I smell a little sour. It's been days since I've been dressed, and I really need to take a shower. I walk the halls, I rock the chair, I wipe the spit up from my hair. I see hours that I haven't seen for years, and suddenly I have so many irrational fears. I'm me, but a little not me. I'm so much more, but a little less. It's not quite what I expected. So much joy cry when I watch commercials. Little things make me upset. My hair is falling out in bunches, and I wake up drenched in sweat. But look at his small fingers and smell that baby smell. That smile can't just be gas. If he's not perfect, I can tell. I'm me, but a little not me. I'm so much more, but a little less. It's true, this life is different, but I'm still me, and so much more. Thank you for listening to the How She Moms podcast. If you like it, tell a friend. The bigger the community, the more ideas. There are lots of ways you can add your ideas to the How She Moms community. We have a Facebook group where we share ideas about upcoming topics and help each other solve problems we're facing in motherhood. You can also follow How She Moms on Instagram for quick tips and ideas. And you can go to howshemoms.com where you'll find transcripts of episodes and lots of other great resources. Special thanks to my mom, Susan Singley, for recording my theme music. She played this song all the time when I was growing up, and to me, it's the soundtrack of motherhood.